more than likely
It was.
for rural development. Now, just so you know, you weren't here for a water project, but the last water project, you did take out of the state revolving fund loan.
Yeah.
So the town has been through that process. I don't believe any of you were on the board at that time. But of course that was a lot smaller. I mean, that was, I want to say it was under $1 million.
Yeah, it
loan.
was.
So,
Yeah.
but that took care of some of the mains here in town and the new well. So
With either of them, the process on the finances is, you know, the engineer would turn in the information to either SRF or USDA. And basically you have to get funding agreement from either one of those sources before you can go forward with an Office of Community and Rural Affairs application. Process for Office of Community and Rural Affairs, they're going to make you do a little bit more up front than SRF and USDA would, but they're a granting agency. So what they can get you is $500,000 towards your project. And these are kind of bullet points of some different factors that you have to look at in your process for applying for OCR funds. So environmental review, you got to contact 7 state agencies, and you do back and forth correspondence with them on the proposed project. You got to have your preliminary engineering report in order for us to put in that information. SIDC, we put in that information for you with the help of the engineer. Preliminary engineering, you've got to have a licensed professional engineer, and they've got to compile the issues, solutions, and the proposed project, listing all the costs, required acquisitions, the solutions, alternatives. So if you are going outside the footprint of your wastewater treatment system, you may be in the process, you may have to acquire property in order to do that. I'm not sure.
they've actually got the property.
They've already got some property.
They own a lot of land around the
Okay.
treatment plant back to the highway, so.
So that may not be an issue. So, you know, at most maybe you need a construction easement or something like that. So, preliminary engineering is nice, but you also have to do final engineering. The final engineering is typically something that's paid out of the grant. Whenever you do final engineering, if you're wanting the grant to pay for it, you've got to do a procurement process. Qualification-based selection, you go out to, let's see, at least 2 regular firms and then 3 MBE, WBEs. So typically you're in minority-based or woman-based enterprise. And so you're going to go through that process. SIDC will carry you through that process, do all the paperwork for you. That way you guys can go through that. There's some advertising that follows along there. The income survey. In order to be eligible for the funds, you have to meet a certain requirement for your income for the communities or your residents. 51% low to moderate income. Odin has met this in the past. Probably won't be an issue, although you always run into some issues during an income survey because of who are the people that are willing to turn in the information. It stays anonymous, but it does ask for income information on it, so a lot of people are not willing to give that information up. You have to have a certain response rate in order for it to be certified within a certain level of sophistication. That income survey, really there's 2 ways of doing it. You do it by mail, or you do it door to door. If you're doing it by mail, you can probably wait until like the December time frame and do it around that time. If you're doing it door to door, you probably want to start tomorrow.
So who does that?
The door to door,
I mean, is that something we're obligated you guys that under contract, or is that,
typically what happens,
we can have anybody do that?
We don't do income surveys.
Okay.
yeah. SIDC does help our communities out with mail surveys. They want to do a mail survey. We don't go door to door.
Well, let's be honest with you, we've already paid money to have one done.
Right.
And then we'll do door-to-door and mailing.
Right.
They're going to do both. Okay, so that's fine. It's a service that we do for our communities because we do it at cost, and so it lowers the cost for communities whenever they're doing the mailing. It's basically just postage and paper that we charge in the future, if that's something you guys want done, let us know. We'll be able to get in on the ground floor and maybe save you a couple bucks doing it. The financing, we talked a little bit about that. You gotta get USDA or SRF, depending on which group. Probably you wanna call in Unball when you decide which alternative you're wanting to do, or as you continue to look at alternatives. We talked about acquisition. If there is gonna be acquisition, we have to follow the Uniform Relocation Act. SIDC knows all those things. We'll work with the attorney in order to make sure that you go through that Uniform Relocation Act appropriately. Permits, they just have to be identified at this time frame, and so that's just something your preliminary engineering will have. And we're looking at dates for the proposal. There'll be a proposal and application. You'll have a public hearing that will go in before one before the proposal and one before the application. So the proposal, we're anticipating it'll be January, but Okra hasn't released the date yet. The application, we think it will be March, but we don't know. The application itself comes out to be about 3 inches thick. Paper, SIDC compiles all that for you. The way SIDC makes money on this is if you're awarded the funds, then we seek to be your grant administrator on the project. The funds that come from it, basically, since it's a federal funds come into this, you have to have a certified grant administrator carry you through that process to make sure you don't expend the funds inappropriately. There's a lot that goes into it, dealing with Davis-Bacon wages, getting all your clearances, making sure you're meeting everything with State Board of Accounts. But we charge a percentage off the grant amount. Typically, it's somewhere between 7 to 8%.
7 or 8?
Yeah. And if you don't get funded,
50,000 in here for
yeah.
estimated grant administration, environmental.
If it would, yeah, you add in the Davis-Bacon environmental, it would top out at 48,000. But it's always something. You go through a procurement process for administration as well, so it's one of those things we have to be competitive on that as well. We do have a very good track record. We've been in business 40 years, quasi-governmental. So we have none of the government funding, all the regulations. So worst of both worlds, the way we survive is going out doing projects. So, I mean, we have to be good at doing projects. We can't spend a lot of time and money and effort on projects that don't get funded. It's a waste of our time too. So we make sure that we do everything we can to make sure the community gets their best shake at getting these funds. Last 5 years, we brought in $45 million into our 5-county area. That's better than anyone else in the state. So
you do the accounting as the project goes along, the work is certified as done, completed, and then a check is written, right?
yeah, we do all the grant drawdowns, process all of that. We'll put it into a letter form, send it to the clerk treasurer. She just has to follow along with it, and then make sure she does everything to the letter that we send her. And then we would request, now with the new state rules from State Board of Accounts, that one person would be overseeing that. So you'd sign off on that as well, to be reviewing that along the process. You would essentially become the grant overseer. So.
And I have a checklist already kind of developed for you guys.
Well, your proposal, did it say like more or less doubling our capacity?
Yes.
And then when you guys last year, 'cause I think Tom, when he's on the board, he went to your guys' meetings as a representative. And said, I think it was SIDC had put out in one little book, she's had a meeting or whatever, that you guys expected growth in Davis County so much in so many years. Was that your meeting?
No, I don't think it was mine.
That was the Southern Indiana Development. Is that what that is? Yeah. There was a brochure that came.
Oh, in the sets and in the.
Yeah, 'cause he was talking about Davis.
Maybe Davis
Lawrence.
County, maybe Davis County Growth Council. Would you have been at that one? We do put out some projections. But,
I guess what I was getting at, well, obviously you know what I'm talking about, but
right,
if you guys knew what the expected growth was, how that compared to what you're saying we